Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. We talk a lot about the dark funnel, that messy, sort of invisible buyer layer happening before prospects ever truly land on your radar. And this is the space we call the middle of the funnel. It's where buyers are self-educating, exploring, navigating entirely on their own in many cases. But here's the one part of the dark funnel that I don't think gets talked about enough. And it truly is your biggest problem. And it is that moment that matters most when the buyer is finally ready to engage. And that's where so many organizations are failing. You've been invisible to them for months, or they've been invisible to you for months. And then suddenly they raise their hand, they step into the light, and they signal that they're ready to talk. But do you have the right processes, the right infrastructure, the right technology, etc., to meet them? So today we will challenge the belief that the dark funnel is the main obstacle, because the real risk isn't what you can't see, it's what you fail to act on when the buyer finally makes themselves known. So let's unpack how to be ready for that moment and why, if you're not, you're leaving revenue on the table. And to have this conversation with me, I am joined by Maddie Bell. Maddie is the CEO and co-founder of Scheduler AI, where she built patented AI agents driving millions in go-to-market pipeline value. With deep expertise in scaling high-impact workflows, Maddie helps B2B teams boost speed, personalization, and efficiency. Before Scheduler AI, she led billion-dollar brands at Procter & Gamble and now channels that strategic muscle into transforming sales and marketing engagement. Maddie, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
This is awesome. No, this is great. I both feel comfortable and on the couch, right? Because what a warm, cool vibe to be brought into, but then also ready to go. I feel like you guys, you're right where it needs to be. It's going to be an exciting talk.
Yes, I am so excited to talk to you today. I had the pleasure of hearing you speak multiple times a while back at Atlanta AI Week, and so excited to be able to continue that conversation. But before we jump in, our industry loves its fancy jargon, and let's be real, so many of the buzzwords are just fluff and can hold us back more than they help. And so for buzzword banishment, we get to banish an overused buzzword. So tell me, which would you like to get rid of?
All right. I wanted to create some controversy here.
Okay.
So I actually want to get rid of the buzzword speed to lead.
Ooh. That one's going to be a challenge for me. So
yeah,
tell me why you want to get rid of speed to lead.
Right. And why do I? Because half of the day, I'm talking about what a lot of people think that means. The reason that I want to get rid of speed to lead is because I think we've started to define action off that differently than what the buyer wants. So I would like to kill the phrase speed to lead, because I would like to have us introduce and maybe focus more on the phrase speed to first conversation. Because I think a lot of people today have started to see speed to lead as a KPI or an email sequence or a routing path where the lead gets assigned to a rep as quickly as possible. And I think what's happened is our automations have started to define that term more than our connection with our buyers. Because at the end of the day, What a buyer does not want is the fastest email sequence possible to show up in their inbox, right? What they want is a meaningful conversation that moves them to the next step in the buying journey. And for those of us that are trying to win, quote, speed to lead with things like forms and sequences and automations, a lot of times what we're doing is we're not solving what the buyer wants. We're just kicking the can down the road, right? Oh, I got them because they got my email sequence. Well, great. What happens when they respond, right? You still have not actually gotten to that first conversation. And that's where we see a ton of pain. So I do want to kill a buzzword. I want to kill speed to lead, but that's because I want to replace it with this idea of speed to first conversation.
Okay, I can support that. And it is a perfect segue into our topic today because, whether your buyer journey is happening in the dark, in the light, like there's all, we talk about that from the point they know you exist to the point where they are ready to engage. That's what we call the middle of the funnel. Some of it's in the dark, some of it we may know who they are. And there's a lot of emphasis put there, and as it should be, like you need to make sure you're getting the right information to the buyer, so that you're in the consideration set and all of those things. But the place where people are dropping the ball most is in that moment of, where the buyer is actually ready to engage. And so my first question is, what's the most damaging myth about the dark funnel or buyer readiness that's really holding companies back?
I think the most damaging myth is that, the moment they raise their hand visibly is the start of the process, right? I think for many go-to-market teams, when you think about your meeting funnel, your go-to-market pipeline, for you, that moment that you finally get that contact into your system, that is, quote, the starting gate. But the reality is buyers start the process, like you mentioned, much earlier than their signal. And or at least when they're willing to, quote, give you their information. So I think our myth is really that the start of a hand raiser starts when they fill out a form, because there's so much there that's just not accurate in the way that buyers are actually buying. A lot of people, they kind of know this, but I don't know that we've really internalized it. On average, only 3% of buyers fill out forms, like to book a demo or book a call. 3%, right? If I knew that there was a 3% of rain tomorrow, I would not pack an umbrella because, right? Because there's a 97% chance that rain will not occur, right? So we are not actually in the place where we're starting to think, okay, how can we start more conversations with the 97% of people that aren't willing to fill out a form and give you all their personal information before they've done their research? And that really, to me, is one of the most interesting spaces, because not only are people saying, hey, I don't want to fill out the form, I'm going to do tons of work before I do that. I'm literally going to almost do as much as possible because I know what happens if I fill out your form, right? My grandkids are going to be put on a nurture campaign. But the other piece there is what's happening before that form fill has really changed. And we really need to take a minute and understand that, because it used to be, right, that the reason the form, the gate, the friction worked was because buyers needed information on the other side of that gate, right? If I want to know how to get to the next step in this process, as annoying as it is, I need to go in, I need to fill out the form, I need to wait for somebody to call me, they're going to have some questions, then we're going to have a call, then eventually I'll see the product 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 meetings later, right? But they did that because they needed to understand how to solve their problem. And I think what's really changed is the barrier to information has fundamentally fallen through the floor, right? Now buyers can access information with a click, a prompt, a conversation about your business with an LLM. And so I think the time is extremely ripe for us to try to say, hey, if you can talk with my business, like about my business with an LLM, why can't you talk about my business with me on my site, with my AI, with my conversations? Right. And so I think before this was always a problem, right? It's not like people were filling out forms in the 98th percentile 5 years ago. But I think the stakes have just gone so far up, and people need to realize these conversations are happening whether you want to be a part of them or not.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point because the evolution of access to information is really what has changed things. Like I can think about being a kid. If I wanted to do research, I had to go to the library or you had encyclopedias and the information was outdated. And, people came to your door to sell you vacuum cleaners because information was not readily available. You fast forward, we get the internet, more is available, but it was all protected. And now it's like gating almost anything is fairly pointless, unless the information has some impact, because they can get the same information about you without you being a part of the conversation. And I think, that, like, that holisticness of how the journey has changed. I see marketers adapting to slowly. And we see less people gating things and less people following the old playbooks, but kind of fast forwarding back to that moment of engagement where, some statistics say they're 95% through the journey by the time they reach out, that percentage varies. But it's like, based on where we are now, what I'm getting at is how should we be thinking about that engagement differently in terms of how we are trying to orchestrate things?
So I think the cool thing about all this, right, is our tech landscape has 100% changed. But luckily, humans haven't changed one iota, right? Like in eons, right? We're still irrational, we're still emotional, we're still relatable, like we relate, right? And I don't know that that has really changed as much. And so I think the best way to think about that is I think we had the right ideas, right? So we do see companies starting to track these signals more aggressively, right? Signaled intent, right? Things that I'm doing that indicate I have indeed entered the dark funnel. And we've seen a lot of robust platforms to track that, right? It could be a content download, right? Fine, I'll give you my fake information to read your content. Or maybe it could be, attending an event or, mapping out different networks where you have people that are connected to different people. So I actually think our signals have improved. And then I think we almost got there with this idea of, for each of these signals, we indeed need a different sequence, right? Like we need to have different conversations based on that little tiny signal, that hand raise. And I think, we got close there, right? To say, okay, we're going to map out our signals. We're going to start lining up these different sequences based on those signals. I think where it fell flat was a few things. Number one, just the sheer volume of those signals and the amount of use case level personalization. It's just really hard to personalize for a person without asking them about themselves. Again, without starting a two-way conversation. You're just creating permutations and you're guessing. And I always laugh, right? Because I heard someone say this once, the best way to figure out where someone is in the buyer journey?
Ask them.
Ask them. And so, but we didn't have that capability before. Like we really couldn't ask a question and create dynamic answers based on what the buyer said. I think that is where AI is coming into the go-to-market world in a uniquely valuable way. And in a way where, a lot of people I see trying to replace human-to-human connection in the selling journey. I actually think that's not the first place to win. I think filling gaps between meaningful buyer-seller connections is where AI can absolutely shine, because it can take triggers at the infinitesimal level. It can have objective based conversations. Say, hey, why'd you download that? Hey, what'd you get out of the event? Hey, are you still trying to solve this problem? And it can use that information to get to those next steps, to cross that bridge, right? Through nurture, discovery, qualification, and then saying, okay, yes, now we need to get this person to routed to the right person inside my organization. And for me, that's where I am most excited, is using AI to go from signal to scheduled and using it to bridge the gap, not by spraying and praying, but making it easier for the right buyers and the right sellers to connect for the right reasons to move the whole process forward faster, because that is actually a way where companies beat the LLMs. Because the problem with those LLMs and asking them all the questions is they don't do the last step, right? I can answer you every single question about this business, but I cannot book a meeting with them, right? And so for me, this is an opportunity to close that gap and take control of the conversations and actually galvanize the best playbooks and allow them to happen at scale. So for me, this is the unique area where, yes, our ability to have AI agents as part of our go-to-market pipelines is now changing our ability to match true buyer signals with true conversations that actually get the right people in front of your sellers.
And I definitely agree. You hit on a couple points that I want to dig into. Before I dig into those, I actually want you to give an example, because I think the thing that really impressed me most when I heard your talk is I've heard the message that you just said before, in terms of like, this is where AI can thrive in helping to capitalize on that moment where someone is ready to talk. And I had sort of mentally, come up with what that could look like. But the way that you were able to kind of run down a real world example really was like, it blew my mind a little bit, because it expanded my thinking way beyond where I had landed. And I feel like I am, at least a moderate adopter of AI at this point. And I know everybody's not there. So at first, like to have you give a good example of what that looks like.
Yeah. So for those wondering, like, I'm going to give a few examples. The one cheat code that I like to give people is, if you're looking to find an example in your business, don't forget to follow your own pipeline math. So a lot of times, right, people will listen to these conversations and be like, I saw AI do a cool thing. We should do cool things too. Then it will be cool. And the problem, right, with that is, if you don't go into it saying, hey, here's the buyer seller gap today, and I'm going to go solve that, you end up with a lot of questions and uncertainty in terms of how to go execute and how to go roll it out in your company. So I'll give you maybe 3 examples, but I want to start each of those examples with, how you would actually calculate it to know, like, if this is a problem, right, for your buyers that you need to go solve. So one of them we kind of talked tangentially is AI web chat. So the way we kind of quantify, does your business have a problem with that, is to look at how many people are coming to your website every day. Is that 10,000? Is that 20,000? And what % of them are filling out your forms and booking a call, right? Because if it's the 3%, then now we have 19,000, 22, like, people that are not even, no one's even trying to start a conversation with them. So, okay, so we have 20,000 people no one is talking to. I call that an opportunity, right? So that's the first piece, is we want to figure that out. If you don't have site traffic, if you're running exclusively an ABM motion, maybe this isn't for you. But if you have traffic, you have buyers, okay, we there's value in a conversation. Cool. The next step to handle that then is saying, okay, how does AI play here uniquely? So again, we're seeing 2 problems in the AI web chat space today. One is we put up a web chat and we're very sneaky. We hide a form in it. Right? Here, do you want to chat? Great, fill out this form, right? And to be clear, they already rejected that route. They're not like, oh, now this form is prettier, so I'm going to do it, right? So that is not really going to work. And then the second thing we do is we say, no problem. We'll have the rep jump in as soon as they start a conversation. Because nothing feels better than just sitting around waiting for a buyer to ping you out of nowhere and then feeling like your tail's on fire trying to get to it. Now, maybe you don't think your tail needs to be on fire, but the average bounce rate on a website is 1 minute and 43 seconds. So if I go to a chat and you tell me a rep is coming, you have about 1 minute and 43 seconds before I'm already tired of this, right? Because you said chat, you didn't say waiting room.
Right.
Right. So the third way, the example of how does AI solve that tension is the reason you put the forms, the reason you need the reps is you want some intelligence there. Right? It's not an if-then thing. There's actual need for intelligence. And so, we build AI agents that are able to say, can you tell me more about your use case? And we build AI agents that have qualification objectives, figure out who they are, what their time is to implement, whether or not they're a decision maker. And then based on that conversation, you can prompt your AI agent to either move them into a meeting with maybe a closer, move them into a meeting with a different rep if you feel like it's still unclear, or even have the AI send them some self-serve, maybe a demo on demand if they're a small client. And so again, you start with this problem. There's thousands of people that no one's talking to. You look at the gaps in the ways people are trying to solve it today, forms disguised as chats and things that reps can't handle. And then you say, what if I could put AI in there to kind of run this flow for me? And lo and behold, we have companies that have delivered millions just by doing that. So that's one example. I'm happy to share two more, or we can, keep dialoguing into other fun areas of the GTM world.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit, and then we'll come back to some more examples, because one of the things you hit on, and I forgot how you phrased it, but talking about you have to really understand your sales process, where the friction is, where the problem is to solve. And this is a big gap that I see for a lot of people. When we talk about AI readiness and opportunities, I know even just from chatting with some people after your session, there were multiple people that were like, oh, we got to do this. This is the cool thing. This is amazing. But even just kind of picking their brain a bit, and, they could have been the wrong person, but they weren't really clear of all of those, what signals are we looking for? What are our objectives and next steps? What's going to be most effective? Like, it's really obvious when it's SaaS, like SaaS technology, the process is pretty defined, but we see so many organizations that don't have that real understanding of not only the buyer's journey, but even clear process and handoff, like the example you gave of this scenario, it goes to this closer type salesperson. This scenario, it goes here.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many companies that would get the tech, but they don't have the process, the rigor, we call it path to revenue or lead management. Like, they don't have any of that in place. And so I'm really curious if you've seen that as well, and if you've got thoughts around how people overcome that before they just try to jump into, let me get this new cool thing.
No, not only do I recognize it, it actually, believe it or not, in our earlier days was one of our top business challenges. We naively so came into the game thinking, what the team needs is the AI agent that's capable of doing all the right things to book a meeting. All it has to be able to do is, engage them across text message, email, chat, hit the qualification objectives, use that to sync to the calendars, run the routing. That's cool. Propose times, not links. Awesome. Do the reminders and the rescheduling, even better. Record the meeting, right? We thought we were hot stuff because we could just give you that thing, right? And what we found was exactly what you said. Doing this right is both art and science. It really is. And you can throw all the science at it you want. If you don't have the artistic buyer-seller journey mapped out in a way that feels like a good experience, the whole thing falls apart. And what we called that at the time was white paper syndrome, right? Like we get customers in there and be like, okay, how do you want to qualify your leads? And they would be like, "Ooh, yeah. So will we just find out, are they like more than 100 employees, right? Or, do they live in Iowa, right? Versus like, but don't you want to know things like what their challenges when they're trying to implement?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I think I actually do want to know that, right?" And so we realized, wait a minute, they don't know. So there's a few ways that we have solve that problem. And the interesting one, this is going to get a little meta. We use AI. So what we've started to do is we've been able to look at the thousands of AI conversations and booking workflows and start to allow the AI to actually research your company, to put together a draft of best practices based on these workflows. Like, this is what works, and then actually allow you to become editors of that. And that, I think, regardless of how you get to that state, whether you use a platform like ours that helps you get there, or whether you use an agency or an expert, or you just get your team in a room, I think starting with that first draft is always the biggest lift, right? Because from then you can go into optimization. You can say, oh, you know what? Some customers came in, they answered that discovery question. I think we're asking it wrong. Let's just tweak that, right? You get into a great space of optimization after that fact. But it is really getting in there, getting the commercial leadership, right? This is not a technical challenge, right? So I see a lot of people being like, RevOps will fix this, right? You need marketing and sales in the room. And then, like I said, using an intelligent platform to say, hey, based on what I know about you and your business, here's what I think you might want to go with. And then allow, like, again, you want a platform like ours that allows you to iterate on that and quickly change it and say, hey, you know what, that's actually not what I exactly want. So we actually use AI to build AI so that we can deploy AI. Like I said, a little meta there.
But no, I mean, it is one of those things because ultimately RevOps is the team that will deploy and make sure all the systems are set up and all of that to support it. But you are right in that they are generally not the ones defining it. And the other thing that it made me think about like listening to you talk about this is getting this right also changes your team structure, how you hire, because even in that example that you gave, like I would want to have salespeople who are like the closer. Like we know when we've
Yep.
teed up somebody who is like ready to go, right ICP, like, they're that home run hitter. That's a different skill set than the person that, where there's still some questions, is still unsure. You've got to do a bit more discovery to really understand. There may be a little bit more selling in there. And it's like, to me, like managing that friction point of when a buyer is ready to engage opens up so much in terms of how we structure our sales teams and what marketing is developing to support the process, getting them to that point. Like it feels like a much bigger change holistically across revenue, being able to tap into AI in this way.
It is. And I think there's a few things that that make that true. So one thing is, if you look at our SaaS, it actually mirrors our functions, right? So you can probably look at a MarTech stack. We even have names for it, right? We have MarTech, we have RevTech, or the sales tech stack, right? And then you have the customer success tech stack. We've actually built stacks at the functional level. And we do that, right? Because organizations have buying structures and they have bosses that can make decisions, and going across them is a violation of business everything, right? Because now we got 10 people in the room. Anybody who's been in an organization is like feeling the pain as I'm talking this. The problem that I think AI is going to disrupt here is, for a long time, the 1 + 1 = 3, the lateral value across the tech stack, was only marginally more helpful, right? Like, okay, like it's cool that these guys have this widget digit and they have this widget digit and they have this one. So I only have one provider. Like that's fiscally responsible and helpful in terms of just mind spent on SaaS. So I'm not saying that platform consolidation wasn't valuable. It was, but it was more so valuable for the simplification for the team. What's different here, what's fundamentally different here is AI can take knowledge from the top of the funnel and apply it throughout, right? That an agent that's capable of having that first conversation with a customer is also capable of being the one to reschedule the call when somebody gets sick, is also the one to be able to record the meeting notes and understand where it needs to go next, is also the one that's updating the CRM and the lead status. You can create intelligent loops that essentially solve the leak across the pipeline. And that is unique and very, very different. So that is one thing that I think, again, I never want to propose a technical solution to people without a business rationale. And the rationale is the technology will work harder for you if it is able to work end to end. Therefore, to your point, we now need to see how our groups, marketing, sales, customer success, can collaborate when it comes to designing this end-to-end flow together in a way that optimizes everything. And I think the one encouragement there, because that feels like a lot, right? Everyone's like, you just asked a lot of change for me, and nobody likes change, right? Like I get it, is that the new tooling is going to be able to help you break down some of those real barriers of the past. So for example, one of the most famous is the MQL to SQL divide, right? The marketers say they're qualified. The salespeople say that's not qualified, right? And we just go back and forth until eternity. A lot of that comes from a limitation in our stack, which people don't really recognize, which is most of that lead scoring is being done on firmographic data. Oh, you work at a healthcare company and it has 1,000 people and you have a title that means marketing. You are a qualified lead for sales, right? And then sales has to go and be like, wait a minute, they don't have any intent. They have no timeline. They have no budget. The actual decision maker is in Guam, right? And so they were never able to match that. So I think the rise of things like AI lead qualification and screening, the rise of AI routing will actually allow marketers and sellers to get in a room, say, this is what we're looking for, and have a tech stack that can actually deliver those exact leads to them 24/7, 7 days a week. So again, it's an evolution, but it is real. It is happening now. And I honestly think it is just fabulous because now instead of an MQL or an SQL, you have a CQL, a conversationally qualified lead. And you know, based on a conversation, you can see in your CRM that this person has indicated they are the agreed upon person. And that marketing and sales divide suddenly starts to streamline itself out. So is it a lot? Yeah, but am I excited for it? Totally.
I am definitely with you. And it's one of those things like I have debated, there's all the debates about the term. And to me, the Q is all that matters. Like whether you call it MQL, MQC,
The Q is all that
MQA,
matters.
like the Q is what I care about. Like we can just call it a Q. And the key there, because some people are like, oh, MQL's dead, and and it's like none of the terms like really matter. It is what you were saying around having the organization agree on what qualified looks like, and then using the best technology available to identify that.
Yes.
And, where we used to be, that lead scoring that you're describing, I think about when marketing automation first became a thing. You first, because at one point, all we had was firmographic qualification. Then we got marketing automation and we got some digital body language. So we started to marry the two where it was still dominated by firmographic. But then we had some digital body language of what they're doing. And now digital body language is being called signals, which, holistically, they're about the same thing. And that created a score which was way better than what we had, but still had a lot of gaps because it was a marketer identifying the things that they cared about and coming up with, the most logical way to weight that and depreciate and all of that. And now the best available technology to do that same thing is AI that can look across the journey at all of the things, all of the signals, in addition to the firmographics, in addition to what it collects in the conversation. And I feel like that's really the evolution that's happening, is not that things are so much fundamentally changing. Like, we're still aiming for the same things we aimed for 20 years ago, which is how do we best identify someone that's qualified and ready to engage. We're just getting so much more sophisticated doing it.
100%. I don't think the humans have changed, right? We still are talking about the same buyer tensions. To your point, I just think we have a new way of solving them that can benefit sellers and buyers. And I also think it's not the way that is quote unquote the most sexy thing on the street that everyone's talking about right now. A lot of times, we see, oh, well, this AI just raised $500 bajillion and it's going to replace CFOs or salespeople. And I think that's fine. Okay. Like I haven't seen that yet. So not saying it isn't coming. Obviously, I don't have my own fortune telling in this podcast, but I think just taking a step back and saying, but we can meaningfully improve buyer seller journeys by doing things that maybe aren't sexy, but indeed operate in service and sell in service to people. And I think what's cool about that is, a lot of people talk about AI as if it's SaaS, and it's not, right? Like, SaaS is point and click from an operator. AI is truly a describe and done workflow, and more so, AI agents will be integrated into working teams. And I think, any AI that's coming in and saying, I want to, spam this person's TAM and take this person's job and make this person do something because I've suddenly researched them more. I just don't think that's how humans are going to respond well, right? Like, we are going to push back versus, creating AI that creates these invisible bridges and removes friction from human to human connection. I think it's just going to be an agent that you're more willing to hire into your organization. Because at the end of the day, if people don't hire these agents, it does not matter, right? And if they don't collaborate with them, it does not matter, because we as business builders do that in the context of teams. And so I think making sure that each AI agent has an authentic and fair role within the team that it serves is just as much a part of the journey as the tech itself. So like I'm named an inventor on a US patent for conversational AI meeting scheduling. And yet I spend a lot of my day saying, hey, is this the way the AI should be interacting with the humans? Did that give them all a better experience because the AI was there? Was it able to go unnoticed where it should have so that they can focus on what's important to them?
I was going to say, and that's a perfect segue, that we've talked about the problem. Now let's give some advice to fix it. Welcome to the lightning round. So this is fast answers only. Let's make sure our listeners leave with actions that they can take right now to start making an impact. So 4 questions. Finish this sentence. If your company keeps dropping the ball when buyers are ready, the first thing you should do is
measure it. Find out how many balls are getting dropped. We have calculators. You can grab me on LinkedIn and I will send them over to you for free, but measure it. Once you can quantify the problem, you can actually solve it and measure if your solution was successful.
What's one red flag that signals a company isn't ready to engage buyers, but they might not see it yet?
Again, you are pushing out a ton of one-way communication, and buyers are either not converting off of that one-way communication because you just keep slamming it at them and they're ignoring you, or they finally are responding and you're not there within 1 to 2 minutes to handle it. So number one, they're either ignoring you because you're just pushing too much at them, or when they finally stop ignoring you, you're too slow.
What's the most common mistake teams make when trying to fix their buyer engagement process?
I think they look for solutions to new things rather than solving problems that, again, they already have, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're already making buyers wait hours, days, if we follow up at all, just solving that in the near term is going to get you a measurable pipeline win now without having to redo and try all this new stuff that you don't really know where it's going to go. So I think the most common mistake is you're trying to solve this possibility of, ooh, that was cool, versus, hey, here are gaps that I have today. If I can solve them quickly, I create that first win that inspires the rest of the build.
And lastly, what's the fastest action someone can take today to improve how they capture ready buyers?
Start more conversations and use AI to make them fair, objective-based conversations designed to help and serve the buyer getting to the next step, which ideally is a meeting with your team, but don't rush it. Give the AI a chance to figure it out, have the conversation, and move the buyer in the right direction.
I love it. Every good session ends with a plan for progress, because just talking about our problems won't fix them. Well, Maddie, I have truly enjoyed this discussion. And before we go, if people want to connect with you and continue the learning, tell us where they can find you, and definitely do the shameless plug for Scheduler AI.
Cool. Well, you guys can all find me on LinkedIn. My name is Maddie Bell, like ding dong the bell. So you should find me there. And yeah, I run Scheduler AI. So we build fully autonomous AI agents designed to convert warm leads into qualified meetings at their highest moment of intent. And we'd love to help you get started on your first AI meeting setter to help you grow your business.
And I got a really cool demo of it, and I can say the tech is pretty swank how it works and how intelligent it is. So check the show notes wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. We will both link to Maddie's LinkedIn as well as Scheduler AI. Well, Maddie, thanks again for joining me. Like, this was such a great conversation, and even gave me some extra things to think about in our AI usage.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining me. I hope you have enjoyed my conversation with Maddie. I can't believe we're at the end. Until next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.